Yesterday, President Biden met with the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, to discuss the inflation crisis, which the president said is his top priority. And he said his plan to fight inflation starts with the simple proposition that is respect the Fed's independence. Sounds like me, he's passing the buck. Well, given how the president has put the blame on everyone and everything else except himself when a crisis pops up, and pop up they have, I mean, it does look like the president's simply shifting the blame. Joining me now to talk about this and more is Congressman Tom McClintock, who serves on the House Judiciary Committee, National Resources Committee, and the Budget Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of California. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back, Tony. Good to see you.
I saw your your comments last week in committee regarding the CBO. And you're talking about the administration putting a spin on the economic numbers, and you said, look, you can't spin this because the American people see it every time they go to the gas pump, every time they stop in the grocery store. You can't hide what's happening.
Well, exactly right. And I think people see very clearly what has triggered the inflation. Joe Biden came into office and spent $3 trillion that we don't have. They printed the money in order to cover that $3 trillion. Now, what's the definition of inflation? Too many dollars chasing too few goods. Virtually the entire increase in the monetary supply during that period was to cover his $3 trillion of reckless spending so that he could send out $1,400 checks to people. Well, it turns out all of that free money was very expensive, and you're paying it back every day. You go to the grocery store, the gas station, or any place else where you're trying to make ends meet. Wages are now going down relative to inflation, and the estimates I've seen is that the Biden inflation is now costing an average family about $5,000 a year in purchasing power. Now, compare that to 4 years ago when we had about 1% inflation. And wages were growing at the fastest pace in 40 years.
So, Congressman, what you just laid out there, if I'm not mistaken, basic principles of economics. How is it that the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, says, I got it wrong? I mean, this is basic stuff. You put more money into the economy, you have fewer goods because of supply chain issues and other matters. This is the norm. I mean, this is the logical end to that.
Well, as Ben Domenech once said, perhaps it's time that we entertain the possibility that we are being governed by idiots. Now, anyone in a entry-level economics class will be taught about inflation. It is always a monetary phenomenon. It is always too many dollars chasing too few goods. If you have a bumper crop of apples, what's going to happen to the price of apples? It's going to drop. The value is going to drop because there's so many of them. Something is plentiful. It's cheap. Same thing's true of money. You flood the market with dollars, the value of the dollars is going to go down, and you're going to experience that as inflation. And that's exactly what's happening. This is not some mysterious act of God that has struck down our country. These are specific acts of government that were deliberately undertaken by this administration, and now they're trying to shift the blame. But the blame is squarely with them.
So I want to go next to the president's comments yesterday before he met with the Federal Reserve chairman, and he said, "Look, I respect the Fed's independence." Is this another effort? I mean, this is like the Putin's price increase. He's just saying now the Fed's the one that's responsible for inflation, and I'm going to respect what they do. Is this another passing of the buck?
No. Whether you're printing money, borrowing money to cover a deficit, or taxing people, those are the only three possible ways to pay for spending. In the Clinton era maxim, it's the spending stupid. You either raise taxes, and that reduces the purchasing power of families in the present. Biden wants to do a lot more of that. What that also does is to suppress productivity, because business taxes are passed through to consumers as higher prices, to employees as lower wages, or to investors as lower earnings. So you're suppressing supply while you flooded the market with dollars. Again, that is inflationary. What are the two other ways you can finance spending? You can borrow from capital markets, but we've already done that to the max. That reduces the capital that's available to finance construction or consumer spending or home or automobile purchases or business expansion, once again, suppressing supply. The only other way is to print money, and that's what they've been doing. The Federal Reserve has been issuing those open market orders to inflate the currency, but they're doing that specifically because of $3 trillion of excess spending done by this administration. Just remember this: whenever the government spends a dollar, it's already decided to tax, and it will come either from your current taxes, future taxes through borrowing, or through inflation. In this case, it's inflation.
So, Congressman, this is all being driven by the Biden administration, their policies. Of course, it's being backed up by a Democratic-controlled Congress. Can we see some relief in the midterm election if we see the shift in power to where we then have Congress provides a check to the executive branch? Could that help straighten out some of this policy?
Absolutely. Congress controls the purse strings. And again, all of this is because of excessive spending. We have got to have a Congress that is willing to spend our tax revenues as carefully as families spend what they've got left after they've paid their taxes.
I want to shift gears. We just got about a minute and a half left. The Biden administration yesterday expressing its opposition to hardening schools in the wake of the shooting in Texas. It's like they don't want to talk about anything but gun control. What do you think about that?
That's inexplicable to me. You walk into any bank, you'll see an armed guard there. The purpose of that armed guard is to protect our money. And yet the left throws a conniption fit when everybody suggests we ought to be just as serious of protecting our children. That's what an armed guard in a school is there to do. It is there to protect our children, and yet the left won't allow it. And then we have incident after incident after incident like this. You know, it's against the law for anyone, even with a concealed weapons permit, to carry a firearm onto a school campus. Every administrator at Robb Elementary School that day obeyed that law. Every teacher obeyed the law. Every janitor obeyed the law. The only person who didn't obey that law was the madman. And that, in a nutshell, is the failure of gun control laws.
Yeah. I just wonder if all those on the left who are clamoring for gun control that rely on Capitol Police and other security to keep them safe would be willing to give up their security if everybody else has to give up theirs.
Well, we've got more than 50 years of experience now with these laws. They're very effective at disarming law-abiding citizens.
Right.
As they were in that tragic day in Uvalde, they're extremely ineffective at disarming madmen and criminals, as they also were that day. They create an environment where the gunman is king, and that is exactly why 19 children are dead today.
Makes it a very soft target. Congressman Tom McClintock, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.